Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Story Behind the Stories for the January 28th edition of the Neepawa Banner Press. It's really flown by here. I'm your host this week, Casper Wehrhahn, writer, photographer, and archivist for the Neepawa Banner Press. And I'm joined today by Eoin Devereux. Eoin, thank you for joining me today. You do a lot of work with the paper, sports, writing, everything.
That's right. And this as well. Although you're in the big chair, although these chairs are relatively even, you know, the figurative big chair this week.
Yes, I'm in my figurative big chair, wearing my figurative big hat. I'm in charge, I'm the boss. Actually, Ken's the real boss, but, you know, on the show this week, I'm the boss.
What we need to do is maybe get a literal big chair for whoever's doing the hosting duties, a little cushion, the throne type thing.
Yeah, you know, that could be really nice. Could really spruce up the place, yeah.
That's right.
Hopefully not let it get to our heads, our comfy little throne. But moving on to the paper, we've thankfully had some good weather here. And that means that we haven't had to dance from foot to foot outside to keep warm. But there has been some dancing in the area of a different variety, Eoin. The very Irish kind. Highland dancers recently were doing their medal tests. That was on January 22nd, actually, at the Expressive Dance Studio in Minnedosa. And we got a good number of photos there from that, from Crystal Scott, who teaches these folks here. So we have a very good photo of that on the front page with more inside on page 10. It's really interesting seeing, even just like from a still photo standpoint, like the effort that goes into these dances and like the different clothing that they wear to express the culture.
That's right, Casper. Once again, thankful to Crystal Scott for sending them. Each and every year, the Expressive Dance Studio does send these things, and we are appreciative of it, even though we are the Neepawa Banner Press. We like to think of ourselves as a regional paper, and Minnedosa is part of that region as well, so we like to be able to support businesses and organizations like this each and every week we can. And the funny thing is, Casper, as well, is perfect timing this week for these to arrive, because even though we do have a fair amount of news and local news of importance in this week's paper, there wasn't anything really that had that visual aspect to it.
Yeah, we had a lot of stuff this week, but we didn't have much with photos. And we like to get as many photos in there as possible, just because it adds more of a visual element, and it doesn't bog down the page with, you know, the black and white. It helps break things up a bit more. And we really didn't have anything as a result to have on the front page that really was just grabbing for people. And then, yeah, these perfect timing came in, and so we were able to do that.
That's right. The other stories that we're going to be talking about in this week's edition of the Story Behind the Stories, you'll hear them and you'll know that they are relatively important and impact you if you live in Neepawa in a very direct way. And some of our local RMs, we're going to get that a little bit later. But just, yeah, that you, especially with this style of paper. This style of paper is called a tabloid style. Now, again, when you hear tabloid, you think National Enquirer or Star Magazine, but it's actually referring to the size of the paper. And for a tabloid style, it's always important to have sort of that visual, just catchy grab 'em on the front page. Now, something called a broadsheet, which is a good example of it, would be the Winnipeg Free Press or the Brandon Sun. Those are examples of broadsheets. You can get away with a few more words. You can get away with sort of not needing that big bold. But on these ones, you definitely do, to be sort of catchy.
Yeah, it helps a lot, and it makes things flow a little bit nicer. Yeah. Moving on, though, something else that'll perhaps get people feeling warm and fuzzy is we have an update from Arts Forward, and it looks like they have a very positive outlook for the new year. They met with the town council here recently. I don't recall which day, unfortunately, but for 2021, they expected that they would have like a very sort of balanced budget like income versus expenses. Like I think they had estimated it to be about 70,000 each, so they would just be, you know, flat out even. But they actually got a surplus this year of about $53,000. And that was attributed to a few things. One of those being, of course, from COVID-19 related grants from the provincial and federal government, which made up a good sum of that. But also they have a little bit different employee expenses now because they have one full-time employee as opposed to what they did before. And they had budgeted as well some maintenance and update things that did have to be delayed, so that wasn't put in, but they are budgeted for 2022, and they have a lot of upgrades and whatnot that they are planning for 2022, which I think will really just spruce up the place and help it, you know, get refreshed, because it is a very old building with a lot of history here.
That's right, Casper. And again, when you hear that type of number, $53,000 in terms of a surplus, a lot of us think, oh, they're just rolling in the dough. Like Scrooge McDuck in DuckTales, you know, just a vault full of gold coins. And that's not the case here, because an organization and a community group like Arts Forward and a facility like Arts Forward doesn't sit on it. It doesn't lay back on its laurels. It takes that money and it tries to put it back in. As Casper said, in terms of upgrades to the building, because it is getting a little bit older, in terms of improving and broadening its programs, so they don't just sort of sit back and just sort of do nothing. This money is getting generated back in each and every year, and it's great because their presentation that they made here, and this story written by Kira Patterson, was focused on their presentation to the town of Neepawa, requesting a grant of $15,000. Once again, just want to clarify, because when you hear a surplus of $53,000, you might think, what do they need 15 from the town for? And again, it's because they're putting it back in. This money that's coming from the town of Neepawa, it does go in and back out to the people of Neepawa, which is a very important thing for everyone to keep in mind.
Absolutely, yeah. It's, if I recall correctly, from several, perhaps years ago, when I was more closely acquainted with the status there. But the Viscount Cultural Center, which obviously now Arts Forward, that's been the new name for a while. I'm used to the old name, I admit still. It is a nonprofit organization. Like, all this money that they raise goes back into the facility for getting programming, etc., paying for supplies that are needed for different things. So it's all for the benefit of the community. It's not to make money off of it, and it's a very integral part of a community, I think, having a center for the arts, and it's used for so many different things in that aspect.
Oh yes, and most likely sort of an offset of this story with Arts Forward is over the next few weeks, I am sure we're going to have a lot of similar stories like this, because for the town of Neepawa, it's starting to get in and around budget time, and you'll be able to see on page 2 of this week's edition of the Banner Press, I do have a council story where they do talk about some of the things, and there is one line in there talking about deliberations for the 2022 budget have started, and this is part of it. It was a grant request. There are several organizations throughout town that are going to be doing the same things, I'm sure. And we might be, in a few minutes, we might be talking about one of those groups as well. So it's something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. And still in with the arts here, we have some good news for moviegoers. The Roxy Theatre was on an extended winter break, just sort of waiting and watching to see what the restrictions would be, how they would change, etc. And they are planning to come back for, I believe it was February 1st. Well, okay, correction, first weekend of February. So close enough.
Oh my God, we're through January already.
I know, it's crazy.
How
I
did
can't
that
believe
happen?
it. I genuinely have no idea. Like, it's really, like I said at the start of the show here, it's really blown by. Like, I'm amazed.
Like, it feels like I'm just still in holiday mode, you know, off. And if anybody's read any of my stuff, I'm still writing in holiday mode. But it really just 28 days, just like that.
Yeah.
And, oh, we're getting close to spring then.
We are. I'm thankful for that. And
Yeah.
you can feel it in the air. But yeah, the Roxy Theater will be open again. They are planning to open at the moment, just depending on what volunteer comfort levels are as well, to open regardless of what the capacity restrictions will be if it changes and whatnot. Because currently it is 50%, which is set to expire before then, but they found that hasn't really had much of an impact on their operations because they usually don't have to go over that. So for individual showings anyway. So they're hoping to continue regardless.
I'm not sure whether that's good news for the Roxy Theater or bad news that they don't hit the 50% margin like that. Obviously, under the current circumstances, it is good news. But under, regular circumstances, you'd hope that there'd be a little more interaction between the community and the theater. And of course, for their concert series, every month there always is.
Yeah, under regular circumstances, sure, that be a little bit more perhaps worrisome. But I think it also depends on of course, what's being shown, etc. And then of course, right now as well, just whatever spacing stuff they have to do, of course, for COVID-19. And, depending on what the communities and surrounding communities' comfort levels as well for doing activities, that certainly impacts things. But it still sounds like they're doing pretty good. I'm very happy about that.
What's interesting as well, and this actually times out quite well, Casper, I was in Minnedosa today dropping off some physical copies of this week's edition of the paper, and I was speaking to someone in one of the businesses, and they were saying they always like the Roxy. It's got that old school feel and charm to it, although the equipment is high-tech, state-of-the-art surround sound, beautiful visual. And they said they had brought their daughter to, before everything shut down for the holiday break, to one of the shows, and the daughter just loved it. And they were thinking, they're glad to hear that the Roxy is going to be reopening back to the way it is, and that they're going to be keeping a very close eye on what films are coming in. Because, again, when you think of the Roxy, don't think of it just as Neepawa, because there's a lot of outlying communities that are going to come in for special shows and special events. So this is a big deal to have it coming back. Absolutely.
And what you mentioned actually brings up a good point as well, just in terms of the atmosphere it has, because that's a fairly old building as well. It's very unique because a lot of the theaters outside of Neepawa are ultra modern and all that. And while this theater in town here does have the upgraded equipment, it still holds all of the history and the architecture that was originally there, which is just incredible to have that upkept here.
The thing is, and again, this is sort of getting up in age there, is I remember some of the old school theaters, Casper. I was living in Brandon for a long period of time, and they used to have two old theaters, the Stage and the Strand. Now, if I remember correctly, the Strand was just this really tight, small, half a theater where you'd watch films, but the Stage was this big, grand concert hall style downtown. Unfortunately, it's now gone. But there was something special about going in. It had that old school feel to it. And you don't really realize it. You don't really understand that missing from the experience until it's missing from the experience. And hopefully people, when you see films, don't go rushing to Brandon or don't go rushing to Winnipeg to see them in the big modern one. Experience it here, because it's one of those things of you don't realize it until it's gone.
Yeah, it definitely makes for a more unique experience, I feel. Adds a little bit more flavor to it, I guess you could say.
Like flavored popcorn as well. They got great popcorn.
I am so thrilled that the Roxy does the popcorn the way it does, because it feels very old school. And I prefer that a lot more than the Brandon popcorn. I'm sorry, Brandon popcorn, but I like the powdered butter.
Yeah. I think the Brandon one's
powdered butter and salt.
They're trying to make it too healthy. You need some of that, just a little bit of that cholesterol in there to make it so good.
And like, yeah, they do have, you know, like the real butter there. But I don't know. I feel like that's more of like a at-home thing, you know. Yeah. You do the butter the way you want it. I feel like the Brandon popcorn just has like too much on it, even if you only get a little bit. So it's not to my taste.
What you see here is you do a little half and half, a little bit of the regular butter, and then some of that artificial butter that they give you as an option. You mix and match that up. It's unbelievable. Now it's cooking tips with Eoin and Casper.
Yes, we're gonna make you hungry. Well, we'll stop doing that. I promise. We're gonna move on to our next one before we make the whole show about popcorn and food and all those tasty treats. Our next thing here is actually about sports on page 13. There's some good things happening there regarding some former Neepawa players, Ashton Anderson and Justin, I'm sorry if I pronounced this wrong, Metcalf?
Metcalf, that is correct, yes.
Now, you have all the details on this. Explain this.
That's right. For those of you that remember, Ashton Anderson, Justin Metcalf were members of the Neepawa Junior A Hockey Club, now known as the Neepawa Titans. They're most well known for that 1 year where they made the playoffs a couple years ago, that amazing run near the end of the season where they won a bunch of games, a dramatic win in the final game against Swan Valley to put them in the playoffs. It's the one and only time they've been in the playoffs in the last 12 years, maybe? No, they have to have been in there, but it's been a while. It has been a long while, and it was great to have that atmosphere at the Yellowhead Arena, and they were a big part of it. They've moved on, obviously, to the next level. Metcalf is just finishing his 4th year at Minot State University, a well-regarded hockey program in the United States. Division I in the ACHA. They're one of the top teams in that tier division. And Metcalf had a huge weekend, 4 goals. So it just coincided quite nicely with the main story, Casper, that I had been working on. Because Ashton Anderson, who also was a member of the team, and is from Rivers, Manitoba. So a community with one of our sister newspapers, the Rivers Banner. And he had just signed this week, within the last week, his first professional hockey contract with a team, the Huntsville Havoc of the Southern Professional Hockey League. Now, if you're unfamiliar with it, obviously you've got the NHL tier, top tier. Then you got the American Hockey League, ECHL, and then leagues like the SPHL. Now, just because it's on the 4th tier, don't think that it's low level. It is still a very high level of competition. And Ashton, who just finished his 4 years at Dalhousie University, finished his degree, was able to immediately sign a contract and was out there for a pair of games again for Huntsville this past weekend. And we love to be able to sort of tell these types of stories because there are individuals like that in our sports programs that we love to follow their progression over the years, because there's still a lot of people that have warm regard for these people and their accomplishments and what they accomplished right here in Neepawa. Now, whether it's the hockey team, whether it's our local high school football team, gymnastics, figure skating, we'd love to be able to share these stories of local person does good and moves on to that next level. So congratulations to both of them on their big weekends, and hopefully we'll be able to hear more from former alumni of this community in the future. Absolutely.
It'll be exciting to see where these folks go. And, you know, stories like this, that's important to people in the community and the families. And not just right now, but years down the road as well. There's a lot of stuff that I come across and looking back that I'll hear about now and then from people just calling the office, or maybe someone said something to Helen Drysdale and she's passed it on to us, that particular short story or excerpt from Looking Back or a photo that we've ran in the past really meant something to them. And so stories like this will very much be of some importance to people in the future, which is just exciting and sort of heartwarming to think about. So we're very happy to cover things like this.
126 years of history, really, for Neepawa area, and it just does seem to fly by. Obviously, I wasn't here for all 126 years, but...
If you were, I would like to know your secrets. You
I
gotta spill.
I am holding up well for 145. Yeah.
All right. We have some changes as well that is happening in the area. Glenelg Lansdowne, to be specific here, that is on page 19. They have established a vaccination, or I guess just policy in general regarding COVID-19 and how they want to proceed in that regard.
That's right, Casper. It's kind of interesting because if you read the story on page 2, the council update for the town of Neepawa, there is discussion on the vaccine policy for employees, council, and other administration for the town of Neepawa as well. And we were having this discussion in the office there. It's like, we're 2 years in right now from when this began, and we're just, I believe, just over a year now in from when vaccines became accessible. And yet, both these, and not just here, but in other parts of Manitoba, and across Canada, actually, you're hearing these little stories here and there about new policies or establishment of certain policies when it comes to employees and the COVID-19 vaccine. It's like, why did it take so long? And I don't get that much into the wherewithal of why it took so long. That's the important thing about this, Casper, is that it is done. There is clarification. And for Glenelg Lansdowne, they've set theirs up. And there's going to be a little bit of opinion on my part. It's not in the story, but what they do essentially is they're going to be requesting information on a employee's vaccine, whether they have vaccines or not. They don't have to tell them. Don't get it wrong. I mean, this is not overreach in this term. For example, here at the Banner Press, if Ken Waddell came up and said to me, "What's your vaccine status?" and I didn't feel like telling him, I could say, "I don't feel comfortable," or "I do not wish to share my status with you." And there's nothing he could really do about that. It'd be, all right, fine. That's sort of what the policy is for Glenelg Lansdowne. Although, if you do that as a employee, a council member, or any part of the administration, there are certain rules you do have to follow. Whether you are vaccinated or whether you aren't vaccinated. You're going to have to get tested every week. They just want to do all this stuff just to keep every individual that is a part of that safe and comfortable with the situation as it currently sits. Again, this is one of those things of we could turn this into a real interesting debate, I'm sure. But yes, we all have freedom. We also all have responsibilities for that freedom. And this is the responsibility part of it. If you don't want the vaccine, fine. But these are the rules that are in place. And that's what Glenelg Lansdowne has done. They've set the rules that this is how we're going to proceed on this. Same thing with the town of Neepawa, Casper. It's like, this is how we're going to proceed on this. But the interesting thing, and again, for the town of Neepawa, no one will be fired. If we go to an extreme level, it's like no one's going to be let go. With Glenelg Lansdowne, they do have the policy in place. They're going to do anything and everything to accommodate an individual in terms of rescheduling, in terms of situating them in the workplace. They're going to go above and beyond, quite honestly. If a person doesn't have the vaccine or doesn't want to disclose the vaccine information, to make sure that they can still work efficiently. But if it comes down to the extreme, they do have the option, unpaid leave of absence or terminating an individual's employment. Now, don't get it twisted. It's not a case of, are you vaccinated or not? I don't want to say, well, then you're fired. That's not it at all. They are going well above, well beyond, making sure that everybody's going to be feeling good about this and everybody's going to be feeling safe about this. So that's the way it's playing out there.
Yeah. So. And to be clear as well, like it does clarify this in the story, but it's not a super specific, like, are you fully vaccinated? Are you only partially vaccinated? Are you not vaccinated at all? It's just are you fully vaccinated or are you not fully vaccinated kind of deal. So it's like there could be people that only have their first dose that aren't going to be fully vaccinated by that date, that will potentially have to adhere to the same rules as whoever else might be in that category, that regardless of what their situation is in that category. So,
if you want sort of the clarification on that, you can find it on page 19. I was very specific sort of with the phrasing on this. I don't want anyone to get confused on this. I've used essentially, in essence, I've used as much of their own words, which is, of course, what we should be doing, as humanly possible to explain the situation. And this is a bit of a powder keg. 2 years in, it's still a lot of, well, obviously, if you're traveling down any highways over the last couple of days, you'll see it's still an issue. But we're not going to go over that way. It didn't drive through Neepawa, so we're not going to go there. But it's one of those things that everybody's got an opinion, and everybody's got an intense opinion about it, it seems, as things have gone on. So we're all trying to get through just as best we can.
Mm-hmm. So we do have a little bit of time, so I guess we can quickly cover this as well. Another topic, unfortunately, to do with COVID-19. The Manitoba Egg Days has decided to cancel their Egg Days event for this year, just with the restrictions that are currently in place that have been extended. The timeline just doesn't work out well for this year because of other events that might be going on later this year. So even if the restrictions were to change, it just wouldn't quite work out because they don't want to detract from those other events. But what essentially boils down to is that the current capacity would not really work with this event because it is a huge event that's held at the Keystone Center. Like, it brings in 10 to 18,000 people every day. So the 50% capacity would really sort of minimize that and make it hard for all those people who would normally come to attend that, not just on the sort of like display side of it, all of the vendors, etc., that come in there to show off what they have going on, but the people who go in there to see the exhibitions as well. So it was unfortunately a very difficult decision for them, but that has been canceled for this year. But they are planning for a 2023 event, so the date is in there at the end of the article, so keep an eye out for that. And yeah, hopefully they can get their event going for that year.
That's true, although at the same time, this time last year, we were saying they are planning for a 2022 event. So I guess we'll see.
Tentatively, yes. Fingers crossed. Hopefully things will be a bit better then. I believe we're short on time now, so we will have to wrap things up. But thank you once again for joining us for this week's Story Behind the Stories. On behalf of myself and Eoin Devereux. We are a free paper, so we rely on everybody in the community and surrounding area to help us with keeping it that way by giving us advertisements, working with us that way. If you would like to book an advertisement, please contact us at ads@neepawabanner.com or give us a call at 204-476-3401. Of course, we like to hear your opinions as well. If you would like to send in a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a letter, you can send that to news@neepawabanner.com. Or if you have story tips, photo tips, things you would like to submit along those lines, or history items, you can send that to that same email as well. Once again, that was news@neepawabanner.com. Or heck, if you want to send historical items directly to me, newsroom@neepawapress.com. I would be happy to receive them. Once again, thank you, and have a good rest of your week.